The transport shuddered as it dropped from hyperspace, and Lieutenant Kalen Voss knew she was looking at her grave. Through the viewport, the mining station Zarian 7 hung like a broken crown against the void, its outer rings dark and twisted, from whatever had torn through the facility 3 weeks ago. The official briefing had been sparse. 43 colonists gone silent. Automated distress beacon, still pinging, cause unknown. What they hadn't said but what Kalen understood, with crystal clarity, was that she was expendable. Beautiful sight, isn't it? Captain Jorik muttered from the pilot's seat, his scaled Vorthok hide rippling with nervous patterns. The reptilian officer had volunteered for this mission, but Kalen suspected his motivations were as murky as her own assignment. Command really thinks one human can succeed where a full investigation team would fail. Kalen checked her sidearm for the 3rd time, knowing it was more habit than hope. They think one human is all they can afford to lose. The truth burned in her chest like acid. 6 months ago, she'd been the pride of the Terran Defense Corps, the youngest officer ever to lead a successful boarding action against hegemony raiders. Then came the incident on Cygnus Dasana, split-second decision that saved 200 civilians, but cost the Alliance a strategic foothold. The inquiry had been swift and brutal. Her demotion from commander to lieutenant was just the beginning. This mission was her punishment, disguised as opportunity. Zarian 7 Station, this is Transport Echo 9, requesting docking clearance. Jorik transmitted. Static answered him, broken only by the rhythmic pulse of the emergency beacon. The mining station's automated systems guided them into a docking bay that should have been bustling with workers and cargo haulers. Instead, empty berths yawned like hungry mouths as the transport settled into its cradle. Kalen caught sight of movement through the bay's observation windows. Shapes that might have been human, but wrong somehow, too tall, too angular, moving with a predatory grace that made her skin crawl. I'm reading life signs, Jorik reported, studying his scanner. Dozens of them, all human biosignatures. But, he paused, mandibles clicking nervously. The readings are strange. Elevated temperature, unusual brain activity patterns. Kalen shouldered her equipment pack, feeling the weight of the emergency beacon she'd been ordered to activate, if when she failed. Her mission parameters were simple. Investigate the station, determine the fate of the colonists, and report back. What command hadn't said was that they expected her report to come posthumously, transmitted by automated systems after her death. Whatever's in there, she told Jorik, as the airlock cycled open, give me 12 hours. If you don't hear from me by then, burn hard for the jump point and tell command that Zarian 7 is a total loss. Understood, Lieutenant. Jorik's voice carried genuine regret. For what it's worth, I think they're making a mistake sending you in alone. Kalen stepped into the station's umbilical, her boots echoing in the empty corridor. Emergency lighting cast sickly red shadows on the walls, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear a sound that might have been singing if songs could carry such alien hunger. They usually do, she whispered to herself, advancing into the darkness that would either kill her or forge her into something the galaxy had never seen before. The first scream echoed through the station as the airlock sealed behind her. Part 2. The hunt begins. The mining station's corridors stretched before Kalen like arteries in a dying organism. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically, creating a strobe effect that turned shadows into living things. She moved with practiced silence, her scanner painting a three-dimensional map of the facility as she progressed. Deeper into its heart, the first body she found had been human once. Now it lay twisted in an alcove, limbs bent at impossible angles, its face frozen in an expression of rapturous terror. No wounds, no obvious cause of death, just a corpse that looked like it had tried to tear itself apart from the inside. Day 1, hour 2, she whispered into her recorder. First casualty located. No signs of external trauma. Victim appears to have died from internal hemorrhaging, cause unknown. She knelt beside the body, fighting nausea as she collected tissue samples. Whatever had killed this person, it had been thorough. The singing grew louder as she moved through the residential sections. It wasn't quite human to many harmonics, too much resonance, but it carried melodies that made her think of home. Earth songs twisted into something that bypassed rational thought and spoke directly to the limbic system. She found them in the central hub, and her blood turned to ice. 42 colonists stood in perfect concentric circles around a pillar of living crystal that had erupted through the station's deck plating. Their eyes were closed, their mouths open, and from their throats came that impossible harmony. But it was their bodies that made Kellen's hand drift to her sidearm, elongated, stretched like taffy, their limbs unnaturally thin, and their torsos extended until they looked more like praying mantises than people. The crystal pulsed with each note of their song, casting prismatic light across the transformed colonists. It was beautiful. It was wrong, and every instinct Kellen had developed in 10 years of military service screamed at her to run. Instead, she stepped into the chamber. The singing stopped. 42 pairs of eyes opened in perfect unison, eyes that had once been brown and blue and green, now uniform pools of silver that reflected the crystal's light. They turned to look at her with predatory focus, and Kellen realized she was staring at something that wore human shapes but was no longer human. "Welcome," they said in perfect unison, their voices creating harmonics that made her bones ache. "We have been waiting." The nearest one it had been a woman once, Kellen thought, though the transformation made gender academic stepped forward with impossible grace. Its elongated fingers reached toward her face, and Kellen could see veins of silver threading through its translucent skin. "You feel it, don't you?" The thing that had been human whispered, the emptiness, the hunger for something more than flesh and blood, and the brief flicker of mortal thought. Kellen's hand closed around her pistol grip, but she didn't draw. "Not yet. What are you?" "We are what your species calls evolved," the creatures chorused. The crystal showed us the song beneath reality, the frequency that transforms carbon into something greater. We tried to resist, but resistance is just fear wearing a uniform. The crystal pulsed again, and Kellen felt something stir in her mind, a whisper of infinite possibility, of transcendence beyond the crude limitations of human flesh. For a moment, she understood why the colonists had embraced their transformation, to be part of something larger, something eternal. Then her training kicked in. Pain was an anchor to humanity, and she bit down hard on her tongue until the taste of blood drove away the crystal's seductive whisper. "The others," she managed. "The investigation teams. They'll come looking." The creatures smiled in unison, their silver eyes reflecting terrible knowledge. "Let them come. We need more voices for the choir." Kellen drew her weapon and fired. The energy blast took the nearest creature center mass, and it collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. The others didn't even flinch. Such violence, they sighed collectively. Such beautiful, useless violence. But we understand, you must learn, as we learned. They began to move, flowing around her like a tide of transformed flesh, their song rising once again. This time it sounded like her mother's lullabies. Kellen's blast had dropped one of the creatures, but the remaining 41 moved with liquid precision, flowing around her like dancers in some cosmic ballet. Her military training screamed at her to find cover, establish fields of fire, control the engagement, but the station's central hub offered nowhere to run. She was surrounded by beings that had once been human and now sang with voices that bypassed rational thought. "You cannot fight evolution," they harmonized, their elongated forms swaying with hypnotic rhythm. "We felt your anger, your pain, when the weapon fired. Such beautiful emotions, they will make your song so much richer." The crystal pulsed brighter, and Kellen felt her thoughts beginning to scatter like leaves in a hurricane. The melody wrapped around her consciousness, promising an end to loneliness, to doubt, to the crushing weight of individual existence. She understood now why the colonists hadn't fought. Who would resist paradise? But paradise built on stolen humanity was just another kind of hell. Kaylin activated every stimulant in her combat suit, flooding her system with adrenaline and neural enhancers. The chemical cocktail was dangerous. It could stop her heart or fry her nervous system, but it cleared her head like a slap of Arctic wind. The creature's song became just sound again, alien and threatening instead of seductive. Day 1, Hour 4, she snarled into her recorder, backing toward the hubs. Only exit. Hostile contact confirmed. 43 colonists affected by a known crystalline entity, displaying coordinated behavior and apparent telepathic link. Immediate evacuation of system recommended. The transformed colonists tilted their heads in unison, silver eyes reflecting puzzlement. You resist the gift. Why do you cling to isolation when unity awaits? Because isolation is what makes us human, Kaylin replied, and triggered the emergency bulkhead seal. The heavy door slammed shut just as the creatures reached for her, their elongated fingers scraping against the reinforced metal. She had maybe minutes before they found another route. The station's maintenance shafts were extensive, and she doubted the transformations had made them less intelligent. She ran through darkened corridors, her scanner painting threat assessments in the corner of her vision. The entire station was compromised, not just the colonists, but the structure itself. Crystalline growths erupted from walls and floors, pulsing with the same rhythm as the central pillar. Whatever had taken root here was spreading, turning Zarian 7 into something that was part mining station, part organic hive. The maintenance sector offered temporary sanctuary. Heavy machinery and radiation shielding would mask her heat signature, buying precious time to think. As she caught her breath behind a massive ore processor, Kellen's military training finally kicked into gear. She wasn't just one human against impossible odds. She was a Terran Defense Corps officer, trained to adapt, survive, and complete the mission even when the mission parameters went to hell. The station's computer core was 3 levels down. If she could access it, she might learn what had really happened here and maybe find a way to fight back. The colonists had been transformed over weeks, their humanity slowly eroded by whatever frequency the crystal broadcast. But transformation took time, and time meant vulnerability. She keyed her COM unit, knowing the signal would give away her position, but needing to make the attempt. Transport Echo 9, this is Lieutenant Voss. Sitrep update. Station is compromised by hostile entity of unknown origin. Recommend immediate withdrawal and quarantine of system. Static answered her. Either Jorik had already fled, or something was jamming communications. Either way, she was alone with 41 creatures that had once been human and a crystal that sang reality into new shapes. The ventilation system carried their voices to hers, still harmonizing, still beautiful, still wrong, but now she could hear something else in their song, frustration. They wanted her to join them, needed her voice to complete whatever they were building. That need was weakness, and weakness could be exploited. Kaylin checked her weapons, her equipment, her remaining stimulants. Standard military doctrine said she should find a defensible position and wait for extraction. But extraction wasn't coming, and these creatures were patient in ways that human minds couldn't comprehend. No, if she was going to die on this station, she'd die fighting, and if she was very lucky, or very unlucky, she might just find a way to take the crystal and its choir with her. The song grew louder. They'd found her trail. Time to show them what one stubborn human could do when paradise wasn't on the negotiating table. Part 4. The heart of discord. The station's computer core lay buried in the deepest level of Zarian 7, surrounded by the massive fusion reactors that had once powered the mining operation. Now those same reactors fed power to something else, crystalline growths that pulsed with alien purpose, converting the station's infrastructure into something that defied human understanding. Kaylin descended through maintenance shafts and service corridors, her scanner tracking the transformed colonists as they moved through the station above her. They hunted with perfect coordination, their movements orchestrated by whatever intelligence controlled the crystal. But coordination could be disrupted, and Kalen had spent years learning how to be unpredictable. The access tunnel to the computer core was a nightmare of organic growth. Crystal formations had erupted through the deck plating, their surfaces alive with flowing patterns that hurt to look at directly. The air itself hummed with harmonic frequencies that made her teeth ache, even through the stimulants flooding her system. She found the 43rd colonist in the core chamber. Dr. Naya Vex had been the station's chief xenogeologist, according to the records. Now she stood before the central processing unit, her body more drastically transformed than the others. Crystalline growths erupted from her skin, and her eyes had become faceted gems that reflected impossible depths. She was the conduit, Kalen realized, the bridge between human consciousness and whatever alien intelligence spoke through the crystal. Lieutenant Kalen Voss, Dr. Vex said, without turning around. Her voice carried harmonics that made the air itself sing. Aged, born on Terra, colony ship aspiration. Parents killed in the hegemony raids of 2387. Decorated officer until the incident on Cygnus Station, where you chose civilian lives over strategic advantage. How do you? The crystal remembers everything it touches, Vex interrupted, finally, turning to face her. Where her mouth should have been, geometric patterns of light pulsed with each word. Every mind that joins the choir becomes part of its memory. Your transport pilot, Captain Jorik, provided such interesting perspectives on Vorthok military doctrine before his transformation was complete. Ice flooded Kellen's veins. Jorik was supposed to flee if she didn't report in. Instead, he'd been taken, his knowledge absorbed into whatever collective intelligence controlled the station. You're wondering if you're alone, Vex continued, reading her expression with inhuman precision. You are. The Echo 9 broadcasts our song now, carrying it to the next system. Soon, entire worlds will hear the harmony and understand what they've been missing. Kellen's hand moved to her sidearm, but Vex raised one crystalline finger in warning. Violence won't help you here, Lieutenant. This chamber is the heart of our transformation. Shoot me, and the feedback will turn your neural pathways to glass. Then what do you want? To understand why you resist. Vex stepped closer, her faceted eyes reflecting Kellen's image in infinite fragments. We offer transcendence beyond the crude limitations of flesh. No more loneliness, no more doubt, no more crushing weight of individual mortality. Yet you cling to humanity as if isolation were a virtue. Kalen backed toward the computer core, her mind racing. The station's records, the mining survey data, the geological reports, everything would be stored here. If she could access the system, because isolation is what makes us individuals, she said, playing for time, as her fingers found the access panel. Your collective is just another kind of prison, prettier than most, but still a cage. Individual consciousness is an evolutionary dead end, Vex replied. We have moved beyond such limitations. Through unity, we have achieved the computer. Core came online with a hum of awakening processors, and Kellen's interface implant connected directly to the station's memory banks. Information flooded her consciousness, weeks of surveys, geological reports. The moment when Dr. Vex's team had broken through to the chamber that held the crystal. It wasn't native to this system. The crystal was old, older than human civilization, older than the species that had first heard its song. It was a seed, one of countless thousands, scattered across the galaxy by something that had transcended physical existence eons ago. Each seed waited patiently for spacefaring species to find it, to be transformed by its harmony, to become part of something larger. But the records showed something else, something that made Kalen smile, despite the terror clawing at her throat. You're dying, she said. Vex's crystalline features flickered with what might have been confusion. Impossible. We are eternal. The harmonic frequency that transforms organic matter also destabilizes it, Kaylin continued, her interface pulling data from the geological sensors. Every transformation shortens the overall lifespan of the collective. You're not evolving, you're burning out, using up your converts faster than you can make them. Lies, Vex snarled, but her voice carried new harmonic sphere, doubt, very human emotions bleeding through the alien chorus. Kellen's smile widened. That's why you need me. Not for my voice, but for my knowledge. You need a military strategist to help you spread more efficiently, to overcome the resistance you'll face when other species realize what you really are. The truth hung between them like a blade. The crystal offered transcendence, but it was transcendence with an expiration date. Every paradise had its price, and this one was paid in the slow dissolution of everything that made life worth living. Choose carefully, Dr. Vex, Kaylin said, because I've got a better offer. The computer core's holographic displays painted the chamber in shifting patterns of data and light. Through her neural interface, Kaylin could feel the station's systems, responding to her commands: life support, power distribution, even the mining lasers that had carved ore from asteroids. All of it was still functional beneath the crystalline growths, waiting for someone who understood how to make technology serve human will. Dr. Vex's transformed features twisted with something that might have been rage. You cannot threaten us with crude machinery. We have transcended such limitations. Have you? Kaylin asked, her fingers dancing across the interface. Because according to these geological surveys, your crystal is remarkably sensitive to specific harmonic frequencies. In fact, it seems like the wrong kind of resonance could shatter it like a wine glass. The data flowing through her implant told a story the crystal's choir didn't want to acknowledge. The entity was ancient beyond human comprehension, but age came with vulnerabilities. It had spread across the galaxy by finding species at just the right technological level, advanced enough to discover it, primitive enough to be easily converted. But it had limitations, and those limitations could be exploited. The mining operation used focused sonic bursts to fracture asteroid cores, Kaylin continued, watching Vex's crystalline eyes flicker with what looked like fear. Funny thing about crystals, they all have a natural resonance frequency. Hit them with the right sound wave, and they come apart at the molecular level. You would destroy yourself in the process, Vex hissed. The station's power core cannot be contained if the harmonic cascade. Yeah, I figured that out. Kellen's smile was sharp as broken glass. Funny thing about being sent on a suicide mission, it really clarifies your priorities. Through the station's sensor network, she could feel the other transformed colonists moving toward the core chamber. They'd realized the threat she represented, but it was too late. Her interface was already deep in the station's systems, bypassing safeguards and rerouting power in ways that would have taken a team of engineers hours to accomplish. The beauty of desperate situations was how they stripped away everything non-essential. Kaylin wasn't thinking about her career, her reputation, or even her survival. She was thinking about the transport Echo 9 carrying its cargo of transformed voices to the next system, about colonies that would hear the crystal's song and think, it was beautiful until it was too late. Last chance, Dr. Vex, she said as the mining lasers came online. Their targeting systems locked onto the crystal formations throughout the station. Tell me how to reverse the transformation, and maybe we can find a solution that doesn't involve turning this place into a supernova. Vex's laugh was like breaking wind chimes. There is no reversal. We are no longer what we were. We are dead, Kaylin interrupted. You're all dead, and you're too scared to admit it. The truth of it hit the chamber like a physical blow. Through her interface, Kaylin could feel the collective consciousness recoil from the words. They had embraced transcendence to escape mortality. But transcendence was just another word for dying in installments. The 41 other colonists reached the core chamber just as Kaylin initiated the harmonic cascade. Their voices rose in perfect unison, not the seductive song of transformation, but a wail of pure terror as they realized what was happening. "You don't understand," Vex screamed, her crystalline features beginning to crack as destructive resonance built throughout the station. "We could have been gods. We could have been human," Kalen replied, and triggered the final sequence. The mining lasers fired in perfect synchronization, their focused beams striking crystal formations throughout Zarian 7, each impact created a harmonic pulse that resonated through the alien structure, and the resonance built on itself, climbing toward frequencies that matter itself couldn't tolerate. The crystal's song became a shriek, then a roar, then something beyond, sound that Kalen felt in her bones. The transformed colonists collapsed as their connection to the collective severed, their elongated bodies convulsing as alien harmonics tore through their nervous systems. Dr. Vex made one last desperate lunge toward the interface controls, but her crystalline form was already coming apart. "You've doomed us all," she gasped as her voice dissolved into static. "The other seeds, they'll learn from this. They'll adapt, ... "Let them," Kalen snarled, her hands steady on the controls even as the station shook itself apart around her. "Humans are good at adapting too." The harmonic cascade reached critical resonance, and the crystal at the station's heart exploded. In a bloom of impossible light, the blast wave tore through Zarian 7's superstructure, but Kalen was already running, her interface guiding her through corridors that were collapsing into geometric patterns of shattered space-time. She had maybe 30 seconds before the station's fusion core lost containment. 30 seconds to reach the emergency pods, to get far enough away to survive the explosion that would announce to the galaxy that humanity knew how to fight back against transcendence. Behind her, the alien song finally fell silent. The escape pod's emergency beacon painted the void with desperate light as Zarian 7 died behind. Lieutenant Kalen Voss. The mining station's destruction wasn't the clean annihilation of a simple explosion. It was something far more disturbing. A cascade of geometric patterns that folded space-time in on itself before finally collapsing into a brief, brilliant star. From her pod's cramped viewport, Kalen watched reality heal itself where the crystal had torn it open. The harmonic resonance had done more than just destroy the alien entity. It had apparently cauterized the dimensional wound the thing had created when it first took root in normal space-time. "Emergency log, Lieutenant Kalen Voss," she whispered into the pod's recorder, her voice hoarse from breathing recycled air thick with the smoke of overloaded systems. "Zarian 7 station, destroyed by controlled harmonic cascade. Hostile entity neutralized. All 43 colonists," confirmed Kia. She paused, thinking of Dr. Vex and the others, wondering if death was the right word for what had happened to them. "Recommend immediate quarantine protocols for any similar crystalline structures encountered in future surveys." The pod's communication system crackled to life, and Captain Jorek's voice filled the cramped space. "Lieutenant Voss, this is Transport Echo-9. We have you on sensors. Stand by for recovery." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by suspicion. According to Vex, Jorek had been transformed. His ship turned into a carrier for the crystal's song. But the voice sounded normal, no alien harmonics, no collective consciousness bleeding through the words. "Jorek, confirm your status," she said carefully. "What's your current heading?" "Away from that nightmare as fast as our engines can manage," the Vorthok pilot replied, and this time she could hear the strain in his voice. "Whatever you did in there, it felt like the universe screamed." "My hull sensors are still recalibrating." As the transport's recovery bay opened to accept her pod, Kalen saw Jorek through the viewport, definitely himself. His scaled hide showing the stress patterns that meant he was either terrified or lying, given what they'd both just witnessed. Terror seemed more likely. "How did you escape?" she asked as the pod's airlock cycled. "Vex said you'd been transformed." Jorek's mandibles clicked in what she'd learned was embarrassment. "I may have. enhanced my sensor readings when reporting your situation to command, made it sound like the station was already lost, bought us both some time. His hide rippled with darker patterns. When that crystal started singing, something in my brain wanted to listen, wanted to go to it. But Vorthok military conditioning includes resistance to sonic weapons saved my scales. Literally. The implications hit her like a physical blow. Command thinks the station was already destroyed when I went in, correct? As far as they know, you died heroically investigating a mining accident. Your sacrifice will be noted in your service record. Jorik's expression was unreadable, but his voice carried something that might have been respect. Of course, if you were to suddenly reappear with intelligence about a new alien threat, Kaelin understood. Officially, she was already dead. Her mission, a failure that had cost the Alliance a mining station and 43 lives. But unofficially, she was something far more valuable, a human who had faced transcendence and chosen to remain human, who had found a way to fight back against something that consumed entire civilizations. The journey back to Alliance space took 3 weeks, and by the time they reached the border stations, the story had already begun to change in the telling. Other survivors from distant systems reported similar crystal discoveries, similar disappearances, similar songs that called to something deep in the sapient mind. But now they also carried stories of Zarian 7, of a single human who had shattered paradise and lived to tell about it. The debriefing took place on Outpost Meridian, in a secure facility that existed solely to catalog threats too dangerous for public knowledge. Admiral Korvash, the Alliance's director of xenobiological security, listened to Kellen's report with the kind of attention usually reserved for religious experiences. "You're certain the harmonic cascade can be replicated?" the elderly asked, her cybernetic eye worry as it analyzed the technical specifications Kaelin had downloaded from Zarian 7. "The principle is sound," Kaelin confirmed. "Every crystal formation will have its own resonance frequency. But once you know what to look for, it's just a matter of matching the right harmonic wavelength to the structural matrix. And the psychological effects, the compulsion to listen, if you know what you're facing." The song bypasses rational thought by mimicking familiar patterns, lullabies, love songs, whatever carries emotional resonance for the target species. But awareness is immunity. You can't be seduced by paradise, if you understand the price. Admiral Korvash leaned back in her chair, and for the first time since entering the briefing room, she smiled. "Do you know what you've done, Lieutenant? You've given us the galaxy's first defense against a threat that could have consumed every thinking species in known space. That crystal entity was patient, strategic, and apparently unkillable till you proved it wasn't." "I just did my job, Admiral." "No," Korvash said firmly. "You did something far more important. You showed that humans can face the incomprehensible and find a way to fight back. That's going to matter in the years to come." Within 6 months, the Zarian Protocol was standard Alliance doctrine. Harmonic analysis equipment became mandatory on all deep space vessels, and first contact procedures included specific warnings about seductive alien songs. The crystal entities, now officially designated Harmony parasites, were encountered 17 more times. But never again did they successfully convert an entire colony. Lieutenant Kaelin Voss was officially listed as killed in action on Zarian, but Lieutenant Commander Kaelin Voss began appearing in the most dangerous first contact situations the Alliance faced. She became the officer they sent when something couldn't be reasoned with, negotiated with, or, understood, only fought. Years later, when the Hegemony War reached its bloody climax, and alien species across the galaxy had to choose sides, they remembered the story of Zarian 7. They remembered that humans could be offered transcendence itself, and still choose to remain stubbornly, individually, magnificently human. That, more than any weapon or strategy, was what won the war. The legend they built around her was simple. She was sent to die, but became something far more dangerous: hope.